Welcome back to Open Line. We're talking with Dr. Lee Williams, Jr., TSU professor. He is also the coordinator of the North Nashville Heritage Project. Fascinating stuff. We've just shown some newspaper clippings that he's posted on his Twitter page that I follow, and it's just fascinating about Nashville history. But I promise we're going to go to the phones, and so let's go to Reverend Fuzz. Are you there, Reverend Fuzz?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay. You know, there are like so many thousands of stories like this, and I just saw the documentary back in February. It points to the newspapers, African-American newspapers from Tennessee. They basically started here, and the Chicago Tribune, those kind of papers, and you can look that up online. And one of the things that I'm taken aback by sometimes, I'm challenged by, when whites will say, and I noticed that a lot of your stuff is in the 1800s, but this stuff continued on up until just in the 90s. But I'm challenged by some whites who say, I can't be responsible, or I shouldn't be held responsible for what my ancestors did. And I think to say, wow, how do you know these are your ancestors? You claim that these are your ancestors? Do you even know what they did, your ancestors? Do you even know the things that do you know these things that he's talking about now, or in Nashville, the home of the Alexander Louis was bombed, or that Tennessee State was underfunded at the legislature? I hear members who are dead now tell me about how the teachers couldn't drive their cars to work on days when the legislators were coming out to visit the school, or that they were purposely underfunded, or, you know, treated in a different way. But those are kind of recent kinds of things. So I wanted to think about, how do I come up with a good response, a good way to talk to people who say to me, I can't be responsible for what my ancestors did. I think it's horrendous, and as your guest says, the past shouldn't be wiped away. What if Belmead Boulevard was changed to be named Hitler? Or would you put Hitler Street in the Jewish community? Or even though the Confederacy, many of those young men didn't know what they were fighting about, didn't know what it was all about, that was a movement that was designed to overthrow the United States. And when you go into a war like that, usually the loser don't get to keep their flag and to fly their flag over the country. Those are just some thoughts, and thank you for having this.
Well, thank you, Reverend Fuzz. And he gets to how difficult the conversation is for so many. And he says he's challenged when people say, I can't be held accountable for what my ancestors did. He's asking, what do you think the response should be there?
They still benefit tremendously from what their ancestors did. The wealth of Nashville was built upon uncompensated labor that was drew from these folks by force. And African Americans still suffer from these policies, from these laws that were created by their ancestors. And if the folks that said this were really honest, they know this. Jim Crow was set up specifically to limit what blacks could do, to create a separation between blacks and whites, and it was no mystery how things worked out, right? I had one professor who would oftentimes argue that blacks got the least of the best and the most of the worst of everything America had to offer, from slavery to freedom. When we look at the disparities between blacks and whites today, be it health, wealth, whatever, that didn't just come out of thin air. That was created by policies that were specifically designed to to place blacks at the lower rungs of society. So I would push back, and if the caller's listening, push back by just saying that where you're still benefiting from the many, many evils that your ancestors perpetrated, and be it directly or indirectly, whether they're casting the votes or whatnot that led to these laws, there still are elected people that are passing these discriminatory laws. And now the challenge is, now that you know that, what are you going to do now? Because I can't hold you directly accountable for what you're doing right now.
Okay, let's go to Jack. Hello, Jack. Jack, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, go right ahead.
Basically, I'd like to welcome Dr. Williams to the program, and I'd like to ask this question, please. I'm having a hard time transitioning over from the Reconstruction period into what we generally refer to as the high education period for Nashville, in other words, up to about 1900. But I'm having a hard time actually realizing how this happened, how the transition occurred, because it's almost as if this Nashville was in like a two-section system. In other words, there was a section for the whites and there was a section for the blacks, and one side got certain things, the other side got certain things, and they seemed like they were separated, but in a way they were together. So in all of your studies, Dr. Williams, how do you perceive all of this, and what kind of studies have you seen that indicate what was going on at the time? This would be post-Reconstruction.
That the period that you're talking about was described by a professor named Rayford Logan as the nadir of African American history. Reconstruction officially ends in 1877, and from that point the South systematically rolls back all of the gains that they had gained, that they had achieved during Reconstruction. Paradoxically, you're entering into the progressive era, but it's one of those periods that shows the very ugly side of racism, because it's progressive era, but it coincides with the increasing of lynching in the United States. For African Americans, they are in a position where they're trying to figure out how to negotiate this new reality, and into this this space, one of the most remarkable African Americans, I think, Booker T. Washington emerges, and he has this plan for vocational education. That is, we should not focus so much on civil rights, but learn vocation, learn trades. And he makes this famous speech in Atlanta where he basically suggests that blacks and whites can live in separate but equal societies. But during that same period that you're asking about, you have blacks like Booker T. Washington and William Monroe Trotter who are pushing against this. They're saying, well, we do need black craftsmen, but we need some blacks that are skilled in the liberal arts. So it is very difficult to say that there's one certain avenue that people pursued, but out of this, I think, in retrospect, when I look at that period, you have a proliferation of historically black colleges and universities where African Americans can go and they can flourish in the face of discrimination. That is, these spaces provide them areas where they can be black, where they can be themselves, where they can study and do so to benefit the race.
All right, we have to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask you to fast forward. Based on all of you have studied, Are you optimistic about the future? Are you pessimistic about the future? Are we working through things in a way that will lead to something positive, or are we just making things worse generation after generation? So I want to ponder on that. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.